The purpose of the Boston Jewish Film Festival is to celebrate an experience that stretches over many ages and parts of the world. The films can be about identity and a sense of history, but also about a Jewish perspective on new challenges and interactions with other cultures. This year's edition is from November 6th through 17th. To tell us about the lineup is the artistic director, Ariana Cohen-Halberstam. Thank you very much for being with us, Ariana.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I want to start with one thing that's new about this year's lineup, and you have a new location, the England Aquarium. So why did you choose the aquarium, and what are you showing there?
You know, it's always been a goal of the festival to be in as many venues as possible and really reach people where they are. And this is one of the first times that we chose the venue based on a film. We're showing a film called Picture of His Life, which is about an Israeli underwater photographer. And this guy has traveled across the world photographing. In the film, he's trying to photograph a polar bear, but he's photographed anacondas and sharks and these beautiful up-close images of these ferocious animals' faces. And as soon as I saw the film, I said, we need to see this on screen at the aquarium. There's no better venue for it. So we're really excited to be able to show it in their beautiful IMAX theater.
Now, is this all about photographic technique and living dangerously, or is there something else at stake in a film like this?
So the photographer opens up about his life and is dealing with his PTSD through the trauma of through the.
He had an underwater experience before that was not very pleasant.
Yeah, so he really deals with his own trauma through his photography and going and diving in these places. And of course, if you're making a film that deals with polar bears today, it also deals with the environmental issues around the work that he's doing.
And speaking of environmental issues, there's another film here called Sustainable Nation. It's really about more than one nation. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So the film follows 3 different Israelis who are all doing work in bringing water to a thirsty world. One of them is developing irrigation systems for land, so you see him go to California helping with the drought there. Another is bringing wells to countries across Africa, and a third is cleaning rivers in India. And you see how important water is to our world, and the way innovation and people really taking the importance of this and working towards changing water and access to water can make a difference in our world.
Well, another way of protecting the world is to look out for animals. There's a story about a very unusual man in Tel Aviv and all these animals. And the title's called No Lions in Tel Aviv. What does that mean exactly?
There Are No Lions in Tel Aviv is about someone they dubbed Rabbi Doolittle, which is a name we should all aspire to. It's fabulous.
As opposed to Dr. Doolittle.
Yeah, as opposed to Dr. Doolittle. He's Rabbi Doolittle. He was the chief rabbi of Copenhagen, and he moved to Pre-State Israel and had this idea of teaching children in Palestine to love animals. And he started collecting animals from around the world and bringing them into his small Tel Aviv home, and eventually built the Tel Aviv Zoo. And it was a place that was a real project of love and came from his passion for these animals, but inevitably this became a sort of unsustainable environment for these animals to live in. And the film tracks what happened to these animals, the relationships that people in Tel Aviv, including the people who were working in the zoo, had to these animals, and ultimately why the zoo shut down. There today are no lions in Tel Aviv.
This has been the news, and we're talking with Ariana Cohen-Halberstam from the Boston Jewish Film Festival. Ariana, of course, Jewish perspective is very important in the matter of human rights. It has really enriched our other perspectives as well. You have about maybe 4 films that deal with that in different ways. Start with one of them, I guess maybe the most current perspective. It's called Dolce dOrnata. It sounds like an Italian film, but it's actually just set in Italy, right?
It's set it's in Italian. It's a Polish filmmaker and a Polish cast primarily, and it deals with a woman who just won the Nobel Prize. It's a fiction film, and after winning the prize, she finds herself in the public eye, and after a terrorist attack in nearby Rome, she takes an interesting stance on terrorism and the role it's playing in our world, and you see the backlash against her. And the film is about how we deal with our neighbors, how we deal with strangers, and what it means to have perspectives on these issues. And hers is not a popular one, but I think nobody knows how to approach these things. And she's coming as a Holocaust survivor living in Tuscany and using that perspective to form her opinion. It's a beautiful film. It's richly shot, and really you get so deeply absorbed into her world that it forces you to sort of think about your own perspectives on these things.
Another human rights figure that we heard a lot about in the 1970s was Natan Sharansky. He was a refusenik in the Soviet Union at the time, and there's a documentary about him. For people who don't know about that, tell us a little bit about his story.
So From Slavery to Freedom follows Natan Sharansky, who was considered a spy in Russia. He was trying to leave to go to Israel. And when the Soviet Union imprisoned him for 13 years, his wife went to Israel, and he continued to fight from behind bars for freedom and for freedom of Russian Jewry. And the term used to define these people was the refuseniks. His life is incredible. His wife plays a big role in the film, and we're very lucky that his daughter, Rachel Sharansky-Danziger, will be joining us for a Q&A following the film, and that will be moderated by William Novak, who worked with Sharansky on writing his book. So a lot of really personal connections to Sharansky will show up at the festival.
Well, I know there's one film dealing with South Africa, and there's also another film, and this is more current in its topic, about human rights in Israel dealing with the issue of terrorism at the same time. Tell us a little bit about that film.
So Advocate is a film that won an award at the Tel Aviv Festival in Israel, which is the biggest documentary film festival in Israel. And it follows Liat Semel, who's a very controversial figure, but she is a human rights lawyer who advocates for mostly Palestinians, including terrorists. And she's a big believer in the right to advocacy. So the film follows her, focusing on two cases: one dealing with her own husband, who was accused of being a traitor by the state, and another following a young boy accused of terrorism. And she's a powerful figure, and again, really forces the audience to consider where their line is for human rights and advocacy.
And speaking of human rights, and I almost didn't think of this right away, but there's a film called Flawless that deals with another issue of human rights. This is about a trans student in high school with some really good friends trying to help her, right?
Yeah, so the film it sort of plays like a typical teen drama, but it focuses on a young trans girl who has moved to a new town, to a new school after being bullied at her last school, and meets two friends and doesn't come out as trans, and meets these two friends who are involved in this weird relationship with a woman online who's trying to get them to go to Ukraine to sell their organs so that they can get plastic surgery for prom. And the trans girl, who's played by a wonderful Israeli trans actress and model, becomes friends with them and then sort of gets caught up in this crazy scheme. And it really deals with identity in a very beautiful, but also very relatable and very fun way.
I have to ask you about the purpose behind this festival, especially who comes to see these films. Is this about bringing in the Jewish community and seeing its diversity, or is it about even bringing people outside that community to come in here?
It's about all of that. I mean, there is I think for many people in the Jewish community, this is a place where they can get together, but it's also about educating about the Jewish experience and Jewish history to a wider audience. And I think with all of these films, what's amazing about film is there are so many layers to each film. So as much as this is a film, an Israeli film, it's also a film about a teenager. It's also a film about a trans teenager. It's also a film about friendship and about bullying. So I think with any one of these films, there's so many different ways to connect. So the festival really is for everyone.
And we should mention once again, this is going to be the 6th through the 17th of November?
The 6th through the 17th of November.
And you've got a lot more details on a website, so which is that we should tell people to go look at?
www.bostonjfilm.org.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Ariana Cohen-Halberstam from Boston Jewish Film.